Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Wednesday the 15th of March. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 385 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition, and then I will bring you today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. The Kremlin said today that relations with the US were in a lamentable state and at their lowest level after Washington accused Russia of downing one of its reconnaissance drones over the Black Sea. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said there had been no high-level contact with Washington over the incident. Yesterday, the US said a Russian fighter had collided with a US Reaper drone, forcing it down into the Black Sea in what US forces called an unsafe and unprofessional intercept. A US European command statement said the collision happened just after 7 a.m. yesterday when two Russian Su-27 fighter jets flew up to the Reaper drone over international waters west of Crimea. The statement said the Russian pilots sought to disrupt the US aircraft before the collision. The Russian ambassador to the US called the incident a provocation. Russia's RIA state news agency cited Anatoly Antonov saying, "We do not want any confrontation between the United States and Russia. We are in favour of building pragmatic relations." Antonov made the comments after being summoned to the US State Department. He later added, "We are concerned about the unacceptable activity of the US military in the immediate vicinity of our borders," accusing the US of supplying intelligence to Kyiv. The Pentagon said the drone was on a routine ISR, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance mission. The US Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryders said Russia did not have the drone, but he declined to say whether Russia was seeking the wreckage so its military intelligence could dissect it. Nikolai Patrushev, the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, said in televised remarks earlier today that Russia planned to search for the drone's debris. "I don't know if we can recover them or not, but we will certainly have to do that, and we will deal with it," he said, adding, "I certainly hope for success." Russia's defense ministry maintained that its fighters did not use airborne weapons and did not come into contact with the US drone. The ministry said fighters from its air defense forces were raised into the air to identify the drone, which the ministry said was heading in the direction of the state border of the Russian Federation. The British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has urged Moscow to respect international airspace. The state broadcaster Suspilny reported that the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv was struck on Wednesday by an S-3000 missile fired from the Belgorod region of Russia. Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the Ukrainian Presidency, posted to social media to say that the area hit was near a school and that there were no casualties. Russia's defense ministry will start a new recruitment campaign on the 1st of April, with the aim of recruiting 400,000 professional soldiers to the Russian army, according to reports. Radio Svoboda, citing several regional media outlets, has reported that the Russian Defense Ministry has already sent orders to regions indicating the number of people with whom military contracts should be signed. Turkey is planning to approve Finland's application for NATO membership independently from Sweden's before parliamentary and presidential elections that will take place on the 14th of May, according to two Turkish officials who spoke to Reuters. Finland's president, Sauli Niinistö, will travel to Turkey on the 16th of March to meet with the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Germany's defence industry says it is ready to ramp up its output, including the production of the kind of arms and ammunition needed by Ukraine, but that it needs clarity about what governments want before investing in further production capacity. President Zelensky and his military chiefs have agreed to keep defending the besieged eastern city of Bakhmut. General Valery Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of Ukrainian armed forces, said the defence of Bakhmut was of paramount strategic importance. He said yesterday, "It is key to the stability of the defence of the entire front." Agence France-Presse journalists in eastern Ukraine have reported seeing white phosphorus fired from Russian positions on an uninhabited road leading to nearby Bakhmut. Weapons containing phosphorus are incendiary arms whose use against civilians is banned, but they can be deployed against military targets under a 1980 convention signed in Geneva. The Guardian has been unable to verify these reports from Agence France-Presse. And Poland's Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, said his country could supply Ukraine with MiG fighter jets in the coming 4 to 6 weeks. Warsaw's commitment to Kyiv has been important in persuading European allies to donate heavy weapons to Ukraine, including tanks. Jeremy Hunt spoke earlier today in the House of Commons outlining his spring budget, a budget which one Tory MP is already reported to have christened the Magnolia Budget. In something of a tradition, the Chancellor had to pull a swift U-turn even before he sat down after he delivered a perfect yes slogan. Hunt was drowned out by the SNP benches after he told MPs independence is always better than dependence. That line was well received by the independent supporting MPs. Kirsty Blackman, the former SNP deputy leader at Westminster, has already tweeted the quote for posterity. After realising what he'd said, which perhaps should have happened before he said it out loud in the House of Commons, Mr Hunt backtracked, with some exceptions, he added, leading to laughter. This is the first spring budget that Hunt has given since becoming Chancellor in October 22, following the dismissal of Kwasi Kwarteng. It comes as Hunt said that the UK is not now facing a technical recession this year and that inflation is set to fall. That's according to analysis by the Office for Budget Responsibility. The Chancellor said, "We will remain vigilant and will not hesitate to take whatever steps are necessary for economic stability." Today, the Office for Budget Responsibility forecast that because of changing international factors and the measures I take, the UK will not now enter a technical recession this year. They forecast we will meet the Prime Minister's priorities to halve inflation, reduce debt, and get the economy growing. He went on, "We are following the plan and the plan is working." The OBR report set out that inflation in the UK will fall from 10.7% in the final quarter of 2022 to 2.9% by the end of this year, Hunt said. The Office for Budget Responsibility's forecast also said that living standards in Britain are expected to fall by 6% over the next financial year. That's the largest two-year fall since the 1950s. And the OBR said Britain was still suffering the effects of Brexit, saying UK imports and exports would be 15% lower than if the country had stayed in the EU, and resulting in a predicted 4% reduction in potential productivity of the British economy. In its new forecasts, the OBR also says that net migration flows will settle at 245,000 people a year, rather than the 205,000 assumed in its November forecast. A year ago, net migration flows were forecast to be settling at 129,000. The OBR's report explains that the higher recent rates of inward migration are attributed to the resumption of international travel following the pandemic, the post-Brexit immigration regime that began in 2021 and issued 800,000 visas in its first year of operation, only 50,000 of which were for EU citizens who did not previously require visas, and other changes, including 129,000 British national overseas visas to Hong Kong nationals, and of course, 210,000 visas issued to Ukrainians. Here are some key points that the Chancellor said in today's speech. He confirmed the government would add £11 billion to the defence budget over the next 5 years. The Chancellor said today, following representations from the Defence Secretary, "I confirm that we will add a total of £11 billion to the defence budget over the next 5 years, and it will be nearly 2.25% of GDP by 2025. We were the first large European country to commit to 2% of GDP for defence, and that will raise that to 2.5% as soon as the fiscal and economic circumstances allow." After a vigorous campaign from the consumer rights champion Martin Lewis and many charities, the Chancellor confirmed that the energy price guarantee will remain at £2,500 until July. It had been set to rise to £3,000. This was another U-turn by the Chancellor, As a result, the energy price guarantee will continue at its current rate, which limits a typical annual household bill to £2,500. It is being extended from April, when it was due to expire, for a further 3 months until the end of June. This means typical bills will not increase to £3,000 a year from April, as had originally been announced in the autumn. The Chancellor also announced a £63 million fund to help leisure centres and swimming pools afford their energy bills, and £100 million extra for charities facing soaring costs. A prepayment penalty for energy bills, which sees households with prepayment meters charge more than those on direct debits, will end. The Chancellor's announcement follows Ofgem's agreement with suppliers to introduce a temporary suspension of forced installations of prepayment meters. But today I go further and confirm we will bring their charges in line with comparable direct debit charges, the Chancellor confirmed. The budget statement also saw the Chancellor announcing that corporation tax for businesses is to increase from 19% to 25%. That means that if a firm makes a profit of more than £250,000, they will pay 25% tax on their profits from April. 1 in 10 companies will pay the full 25% rate, the Chancellor said. The Chancellor also made a number of announcements with regard to childcare support, which apply only in England. He said that he will pilot incentive payments to £600 of £600 to childminders so they can join the profession, which will be raised to £1,200 if they join through an agency. Funding to nurseries will be increased to £204 million from September, and then will rise to £288 million from next year. That comes as the optional minimum staff to child ratio will change from 1.4 to 1.5 for 2-year-olds in England. 30 years of free childcare for all under 5s from the moment maternity care ends to eligible households was also introduced. Parents on universal credit will also now receive up to £951 for one child, and this will be increased to £1,630 for 2 children per month, and it will now be paid up front. It's worth remembering that there are currently 3.9 million children living in poverty in the UK. That's 27% of all children. The pension's annual tax-free allowance will be increased from £40,000 to £60,000. That comes as the Chancellor also abolished the lifetime allowance, which was previously set at just over £1 million. Jeevan Sander, the head of economics at the New Economics Foundation, a think tank, said, "Increasing the pension lifetime allowance is a massive giveaway to already very wealthy people." If the Chancellor hopes that this will help older people remain in work, he's completely divorced from reality. Only around 1% of workers saved more than the old annual allowance, and just 10% were hit by the lifetime limit of £1.1 million. Increasing the annual and lifetime allowances won't do much to help the vast majority of us save for retirement. One group that are supposed to benefit from these tax changes are the GPs and NHS consultants who were forced to retire early due to the pension limits. But this group is far more affected by the annual than the lifetime allowance, which is still far below its 2010 level. The Chancellor said he will create 12 investment zones which will benefit from tax breaks and will be backed by £80 million over 5 years. 8 of the zones are located in England, and there are also thought to be 4 in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The Chancellor identified the West Midlands, West Yorkshire, Liverpool, among others, as potential Canary Wharfs in England. It comes amid a series of levelling up and local transport-related funding pots, with over £200 million in local regeneration projects across England and over £400 million available for new levelling up partnerships. The Chancellor also announced that the duty on a pint of beer sold in a pub will also be frozen. Hunt said he would significantly increase the generosity of draft relief, which he said could not be done while the UK was in the EU. He said from the 1st of August, the duty on draft products in pubs will be up to 11 pence lower than the duty in supermarkets, a differential we will maintain as part of a new Brexit pubs guarantee. However, Scotch whisky distillers were not pleased by the Chancellor's decision to raise the duty on Scotch whisky by more than 10%, the largest hike in recent decades. Mark Kent, the chief executive of the Scottish Whisky Association, said this is a historic blow to the Scotch whisky industry. The largest tax increase for decades means that 75% of the average priced bottle of Scotch whisky will be collected in tax, reducing already tight margins for an industry which employs tens of thousands of people and invests hundreds of millions of pounds annually across the UK. We have been clear with the UK government that increasing duty would be the wrong decision at the wrong time, so it's deeply disappointing that one of Scotland's largest and longest-standing industries has been treated in this way, he added. Speaking about fuel duty, Hunt confirmed that it was not the right time to uprate fuel duty since inflation remains so high. So here's what I'm going to do, he said. For a further 12 months, I'm going to maintain the 5p cut, and I'm going to freeze fuel duty too, the Chancellor explained. That will save the average driver £100 next year, and around £200 since the 5p cut was introduced. An additional £320 million of funding will be allocated to the Scottish Government, with £180 million going to the Welsh Government and £130 million to the Northern Ireland Executive. The Chancellor also announced up to £8.6 million of targeted funding for the Edinburgh Festivals and £1.5 million to repair the Clodagh Bridge, which is on the edge of Elgin, which is in Douglas Ross's constituency. In a move to reduce the carbon emissions that contribute to climate change, the Chancellor outlined £20 billion of support for the early development of carbon capture, usage and storage. Hunt said that the government is starting with projects from the East Coast to Merseyside to North Wales. He said the fund will support up to 50,000 jobs, as well as attract private sector investment. He said he also confirmed the extension of the Climate Change Agreement scheme for 2 years, which allows eligible businesses to claim £60 million of tax relief on energy efficiency measures. That came as the Chancellor also said that nuclear power will now be classed as environmentally sustainable in a drive to increase investment in that part of the energy sector. So what else did the Chancellor say about science? He announced that there will be a prize worth about £1 million every year for the next 10 years to the person or team that does the most groundbreaking artificial intelligence research. He spoke about harnessing British ingenuity to make us a science and technology superpower, and made science a key part of his aim to kick-start economic growth. On research and development tax credits, he said an enhanced credit, which means that if a qualifying small or medium-sized business spends 40% or more of their total expenditure on R&D, they will be able to claim a credit worth £27 for every £100 they spend. It's a £1.8 billion package of support. On life sciences, he said, we have the largest life sciences sector in Europe, producing a COVID vaccine that saved 6 million lives. We will make the UK an even more exciting place to invest, as well as speeding up access for NHS patients to the very newest drugs. On the Digital Technology Review by the UK Government Chief Scientific Advisor, he said, I am accepting all 9 of the digital technology recommendations made by Sir Patrick Vallance in the review I asked him to do in the autumn statement. On artificial intelligence, he said, we will take measures to strengthen our position in artificial intelligence, where the UK hosts 1/3 of all European companies. And we will further commit £900 million of funding to implement the recommendations of the independent Future of Compute review for an exascale supercomputer. And on quantum computing, he said, we will publish a quantum strategy which will set out our vision to be a world-leading quantum-enabled economy by 2033, with a research and innovation programme totalling £2.5 billion. The Chancellor announced plans to abolish the work capability assessment and to separate benefits entitlement from an individual's ability to work, as published in a white paper by the Treasury today. Disabled benefit claimants will always be able to seek work without fear of losing financial support, the Chancellor said. There will be a new voluntary employment scheme for disabled people, which will involve the government spending up to £4,000 per person to help them find appropriate jobs and put in place the support that they need. 50,000 places will be funded under this change every single year, the Chancellor said. Paul Johnson, who's the director of the Institute of Fiscal Studies, has already released his verdict on the budget today. Paul Johnson said it is just as notable what Jeremy Hunt didn't announce, such as no higher pay for public sector workers while freezing fuel duty again. There was no funding to be found to improve the pay offer to striking public sector workers, where £6 billion might have been enough to make an inflation-matching pay offer possible this coming year. That's a political choice. He went on, big personal tax rises planned for next month via the freezing of income tax thresholds will still go ahead. That fiscal drag is hitting living standards. That will mean an extra £500 in tax for basic rate taxpayers in 2023-24 and an extra £1,000 for higher rate taxpayers. These tax rises may be necessary from a fiscal point of view, but they are an important part of the reason why household incomes are still expected to fall more over the current 2-year period than at any point in living memory. Paul Johnson also points out that the Chancellor has been hemmed in by his own poorly designed fiscal rule to have debt falling at the end of the forecast period. And on childcare, the IFS says that Hunt's new funding should help tens, but not hundreds of thousands of parents into work, provided that it is appropriately funded. Johnson says the big expansion in the childcare offer to families with younger children, likely doubling spending on childcare, looks like it will take us close to completing a 25-year-long journey during which a new arm of the welfare state has been created. The SNP's Westminster leader Stephen Flynn MP said, after a decade of broken promises, it is utterly shameful that the Tory government is shafting Scotland yet again by failing to announce any funding for the Acorn project or Scottish carbon capture at the budget. UK government ministers promised Scotland would get £1 billion of carbon capture investment during the 2014 independence referendum, only to break that promise and to withdraw the funding within weeks of the vote. It beggars belief that the Tories are still refusing to hand over the money, almost 10 years later, and it shows how little they care about jobs or investment in the northeast of Scotland. There must now be an urgent U-turn from the UK government. This long overdue funding for the Acorn project must be delivered immediately, not years down the line. With every day Westminster fails, it is damaging Scotland's economy and undermining our potential as a powerhouse of green growth. He went on, by repeatedly failing to invest in Scotland, the Tories are showing why we need independence so we can escape Westminster control and make the most of Scotland's huge green energy potential. The SNP's economy spokesperson Stuart Hosey MP said, the UK budget fails to make a dent in the cost of living crisis, with Tory cuts leaving people hundreds of pounds worse off and Brexit costing our economy billions in long-term damage. The Chancellor should have chosen to help families by cutting energy bills, raising public sector pay with inflation and introducing a real living wage. Instead, he has chosen to make people poorer, withdrawing vital support and imposing real terms cuts to incomes. With the pro-Brexit Labour Party failing to provide any meaningful opposition, it's clear that Scotland will continue to pay a high price under Westminster control, and independence is the only way for Scotland to build a fair, strong and prosperous future. Mr Hosey pointed out that in the budget, the Chancellor had confirmed a series of damaging measures, including scrapping the £400 energy bill support scheme with immediate effect and leaving energy bills at sky-high levels, leaving households hundreds of pounds worse off, imposing real terms cuts to public sector pay and failing to introduce a real living wage, which is costing millions of workers hundreds of pounds, failing to scrap the benefits cap or the two-child cap, costing many households hundreds of pounds, raising NHS prescription charges in England to £9.65, while Scotland continues to have free prescriptions under the SNP and continuing to impose a hard Brexit, with the OBR forecasting a 4% hit to GDP and a cost of £100 billion a year in lost output, according to Bloomberg Economics. Now, moving on from the budget, the UK stock market has suffered its biggest fall in over a year as the city is gripped by fears that a banking crisis will trigger another recession. Shares in the troubled Swiss banking giant Credit Suisse have plunged to a record low as investors remain on edge after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Credit Suisse's shares sank by 30% at one point, extending declines from yesterday when the bank disclosed material weakness in its accounting controls. Investors are worried about how the bank, beset by problems, will handle the fallout from US bank failures. The worries then spread across the shares market, with all major indexes falling sharply. The problems in Credit Suisse once more raise the question whether this is the beginning of a global crisis or just another idiosyncratic case, wrote Andrew Kenningham of Capital Economics. Credit Suisse insisted its financial position was not a concern, with the chief executive saying its cash reserves were still very, very strong. But fear of problems at such a big international player put pressure on banking shares around the world. Credit Suisse, which was founded in 1856, has faced a string of scandals in recent years, including money laundering charges and other issues. It lost money in 2021 and again in 2022, its worst year since the financial crisis of 2008, and it has warned that it does not expect to be profitable until 2024. Shares in the firm had already been severely hit before this week, their value falling by roughly 2/3 last year as customers pulled funds, including 110 billion Swiss francs in the last 3 months of 2022. The bank's disclosure on Tuesday of material weakness in financial reporting controls renewed concerns, prompting its most major investor, the Saudi National Bank, to say it would not inject further funds into the Swiss lender. The FTSE 100 index closed down almost 293 points, a drop of almost 4% today. That's its biggest drop in one day since February the 24th, 2022, the day of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Prudential was the top faller, tumbling 12%, followed by the mining company Glencore at more than 10% and Barclays Bank at about 9%. Energy companies BP and Shell both slumped by over 8%, following a tumble in the crude oil price today. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, which Ian Fraser helped to explain to us on Monday night's programme, could just be the start of a slow-rolling crisis in the US financial system, with more seizures and shutdowns coming, the chief executive of the world's largest asset manager has warned. The chief executive of BlackRock, Larry Fink, also predicted in a letter to investors and company bosses that inflation would persist and rates continue to rise, trends that both contributed to Silicon Valley Bank's collapse. The failures over the past week of not only the California-based bank but also fellow US lenders Signature and Silvergate have prompted jitters across global markets. Such concerns were further fueled today when shares in Credit Suisse plunged to record lows. However, leading financial figures have warned that the instability brewing in the European banking sector could pose an even bigger threat to global market stability. The high-profile economist, Nouriel Roubini, told Bloomberg News that if Credit Suisse were to collapse, it could result in a Lehman moment, a reference to the collapse of the US investment bank Lehman Brothers in August 2007 at the beginning of the last financial crisis. And that's all that I have for you this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station, and to make new programmes for you. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of raising £30,000 in order that we can continue to pay the bills. To everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Just click on the wee bell. We will be back tomorrow evening at 7 for the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please come back and join us then. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching this evening. Please keep safe and warm, and I hope that you have a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.